This brings me to today's talk on civilization and human settlements. This is the second talk of the series, and we have Professor Neelkanth Chhaya as our speaker. Professor Chhaya has been an academician, researcher and practicing architect for more than 40 years. He has been involved with imparting education since he was in Nairobi, and since then he has been associated with many architecture schools, including the School of Architecture at CEPT, where he was also the Dean, Srishti School of Design as well as Goa College of Architecture. With an extensive body of architectural projects, his designs are appropriated to the culture, environment and technology. The relationships these share with the local crafts and skill set come across as almost symbiotic. He is associated with Hunarshala and Khamir Crafts Resource Center, both of which are involved in empowering traditional knowledge and sustainable practices. And it is apt to have this talk here at CE, one of his many designs deeply rooted in time and place. An unsurpassed educator, Professor Chhaya is admired for his wisdom, conviction, and instilling a sense of curiosity for learning. This day, I am sure, is going to be remembered by us as one of those rare and wonderful moments. It gives me immense pleasure in welcoming Professor, and I am going to let Professor Chhaya introduce the topic of the talk. Professor Chhaya.
Thank you, Tide Foundation and Radhika. That introduction is quite difficult to live up to, but we'll talk. It's about discussion, not about talking really. So, can I use that microphone also? Yeah. So we're going to talk about cities and civilization. And the printed version of the program actually said, a woman's design. No? Is that what it said? And which is very important, that the cities that we see today are one kind of city. But the cities, when they began, they were another kind of city. And we are going to look at how that is. And in that, the woman's role was more important than the man's role. If you think about the time, no, maybe I'll just show you two diagrams on which the whole talk is based. You can see in green, it's written locale. Locale is a place, a geography, a climate, a vegetation, a topography, everything that happens at particular places. So you have deserts, you have very cold environments, you have forest environments, you have all kinds of places in which human beings have started living. And when they come to live in a place, they need to develop techniques of survival. And the techniques of survival, techniques on the left hand side, are not, human beings are not like elephants or snakes, that they can live alone. They're too weak. So they need to have a social life. And it's by helping each other that they need to form a social fabric which results in culture. So techniques, culture and locale are continuously interacting. So cities or civilizations arise in particular locations according to the kind of support that a particular environment gives and the techniques that human beings will have to evolve. So therefore, Eskimo settlements are very different from Maasai settlements, are very different from the settlements of Ladakh. Each in their own place, they responded to the context and they created a certain mode of organizing themselves as a culture and a technology which was responsive to that particular place. This diagram is at the root of everything that I'm going to talk about. So please keep it in mind. The second diagram is about any organism's life. That blob in the center is an organism. It could be an amoeba, it could be a human being, could be an antelope, could be a mosquito, any organism. But let's take it that it's a human being. In order to live, that organism has to get some raw material from the environment with which it feeds itself, with which it will create its living conditions, etc. So from one side you have raw materials and you create a certain degree of sustenance, you live and you grow and you continue to live and so on. So that's one arrow that's going right through from left to right. Vertically down, human beings, but other animals also store some of what they got. Animals store it in the form of fat. Squirrels store away nuts that they have found. So animals and human beings store some things. And that store becomes useful in times of stress. Because human beings think a long distance into the future, they've got the experience of the past, they tend to store enough for covering eventualities. And the products, they produce things, they produce material goods, but they, most importantly, they produce knowledge. So there is an understanding that in order to make, let us say, a roti, you have to grind this grain which we call wheat and make it into a dough and roll it, and so all that knowledge. So you have knowledge and they produce some waste. Now different stages of human society produce different degrees of storage, different degrees of waste, different degrees of cultural knowledge. And that is where we can start seeing the difference between the various forms of human settlement. I would not like to see it in terms of cultural divisions, that in India settlements are like this and in America they are like that. I don't want to take a nationalistic view. I'm taking it only in terms of the flow of resources and what happens, and the stages are common across the globe. So, there on top are the hunters. Hunters, it is thought, and most archaeological evidence tends to show that the men were hunters. They were, their musculature was such that they could run very fast, they could exert more strength in killing an animal. But also, can you think why women were less often hunters, though there are places where women are the hunters? Human baby is the reason. Human baby is the only animal form which doesn't come fully ready. When it's born, it's unable to stand, walk, talk, or take care of any of its functions. And it needs to be taken care of. It also needs to be fed. And therefore the mother who could feed the child and the mother who could protect the child when during these early 4 or 5 years when it is comparatively helpless. It's the longest childhood of all. If you've seen a horse or a cow, the moment the calf is born, in a few minutes it's tottering on its legs and then it starts going. Human babies can't do that. Because of that, the women prefer to be located somewhere from where they would not go away very far. And they couldn't, because this kid had to be taken care of and fed. And therefore, you can see that the first houses and the first settlements, the beginnings of civilized, localized existence, was in the hands of women. And the women were the first city builders, not men. Men went out and fought wars. They went and destroyed cities. Women built cities. And so the whole story is going to be between the city as the place of nurture, the city as the place which supports life, versus the city as the place of dominance, warfare, etc. Two ideas, two genders, two ideas of what the city is for. This I will not go into in depth, but you can keep it in mind. So the first stage of settled existence is existence as a nomad or a pastoralist. You know what nomads are. People who go around from place to place. They don't stay in one place. But that doesn't mean that they're not settled. They always have, by and large, they always have a home, and they then have a territory over which they move. Like the Mandharis of Kutch. And hunter-gatherers too. They have a camp which is comparatively permanent. So what is the nomad's? Nomad uses very little raw material. Takes from the environment only that which he needs, not more. Because they know that if they overuse a grazing ground, if they overuse any raw material, it will destroy the fertility of that place. Next year they won't get anything. So they have created for themselves very clear laws as to how much they can use out of any environment. So raw material use is less. Storage is very less. If you are traveling with your camel and you are going hundreds of kilometers, you don't want heavy beds of the kind we have, You don't want to be tied down. And they are nomads, so they store very little, they waste very little. Most of the things that they produce as waste can get used up for their animals in the fields and so on. So waste is small. And they create certain material products and they create knowledge about the entire territory over which they are moving. So it's a very important form of human existence. So you have the Malharis of Kutch here. You can see the entire house is on one camel, whole house. The beds, the mattresses, the vessels, you can see that small pot there, 2 pots, everything, and the stored wealth is worn on the body. So you buy gold or you buy silver and you wear it. No bank. Cashless. This is economy. Yeah? So the nomads have a life in which they do this kind of thing. And they have very great knowledge of the territory over which they are moving. So they have specific routes. And some of the Malharis of Kutch go all the way up to Andhra Pradesh. All the way up to Andhra Pradesh every year with their cattle and come back. And they know farmers all along the way. Because what is the relation? The farmer invites the nomadic herder to bring his cattle on the field. It will fertilize the field. One night you stay, I'll give you so much grain, I'll give you so much of whatever my farm produces. And that mode of exchange is how they get things other than what they can pick from the land. So here they are on the journey, and the journey may be hundreds of kilometers, and they are a people with great pride in what they know and how they do things. In the Maldaris of Kutch, there is a saying that the day when you build a permanent house, that day the world will become hell. I can't speak it in Kutchi, but it's a very nice proverb which says that the moment you build a permanent house, you're gone. Nothing left. And the whole of civilization consists in not owning a lot. I'm going to contrast this to other forms of society. So please bear in mind that material possessions are minimal. See the temporary house that they build using any sticks that they find and the clothes that they wear, they can make a tent and they can protect themselves from the wind when required. It's a very, very intelligent, the same thing that you are wearing becomes your tent. No other thing is required. And then they come out with all kinds of things. They make music. And they have somewhere where they build their houses, where they go back to every year. And the cattle remember them for several years. I've come across people whose cow was lost and who came back when after 5 years, when they saw the cow and the cow saw them, both had tears in their eyes. No, really, this is a fact. And so this is the kind of community that is one of the forms of settlement that you see. Civilization need not take the form only of large concentrated cities. There are many forms, this is one of them. These are their houses. Hunters and gatherers, one or two examples, they also build houses. And they build, this is a men's house in northeast, and they have a place, it's like a club. So you are wandering over the forest collecting produce, killing a bird or two here and there, killing a small animal, bringing it home, eating it. But here, in the evening, you gather. And that social life, you exchange knowledge. You exchange knowledge about territory, hunting techniques, tools, methods, and gossip about each other. All of that, and that builds that cultural pattern through which that life is sustained. The next form of settled existence can be called the farmer. So what about the farmer? Uses more raw material, it needs water, needs seed, needs compost, uses more raw material, produces and has more storage. Of all the human types, the farmer is the most scared type. If there are farmers here, please excuse me. But they are always scared. Will it rain enough? Or will there be too much rain, too little rain? And so they develop all these sort of paraphernalia of dealing with the unknown. Because the farmer has to deal with the unknown. But his settlement has to be pakka. He can't afford to move around. So he has to build a house. Then he has to build a village. And if you see the villages of Gujarat, they will always be on a slightly higher land. They build very dense villages in Gujarat. And the dense village sits in a sea of fields. So they don't build one house in one field. Why do you think that is the case? Because as we have seen in these rains this time, when the water comes, there may be lots of water and you will get flooding. But your village is up on the slight rise, all the way from here to Bhavnagar, you will see all these villages which are on that little bump of a land, and they minimize the use of land because agricultural land is so valuable. So you have the farmer who also creates, as farming improves, more and more storage. What do you do with storage? It has to turn into something which will not rot. So you have to create cultural products. And you have to get metals. So mining has to, with farming comes mining. With mining comes the extraction of gold and silver and copper and iron and steel and whatnot. And with that, you get a different complexity of society. And that complex society is a society which builds in very definite patterns. So here you have in Bihar a farming community which water and land. These are the two resources. Yeah? And they built their villages also on slightly rising land. They built them quite compact so that the land is left free. And they're animals and they live together. You can see here the cows look as relaxed as the human beings in this photograph. Or perhaps I should say that human beings look as relaxed as the cows. And it's what they call a bucolic existence. It's a bad word in some ways, bucolic existence. Living like cows. But then it's a very wonderful, if I say that I prefer that existence to a kind of existence which is a botic existence. You know, bots, we are all bots in some way, robots, and then, but we won't go into that. The cows are a very delicate subject right now, we'll not go into that area. But, so that's how it is. And the house has everything. It has memories, it has photographs of their parents, it has got their bicycle, it has got their clothes, everything is within one space, and that's the smaller farmers' existence. But then see the skills that they have to develop in order to carry out both farming, but they build their own houses. So in this case, they've done everything. Here, this is very interesting. These are fuel briquettes. What they do is, they collect the dung and on bamboo strips, they paste it and they make about that tall and they store it for the whole year. In the rainy season, you won't get any wood for doing a fire and cooking your food or anything, heating water. These things are like, briquettes that you brought from the market. You just insert it and your fire is going. So they have got all kinds of techniques which they develop. I'm just showing you one or two things to give that sense that the farmer has his own knowledge. That knowledge goes into the making of symbols as well. It might be working with metals, it might be. So what is the symbol? There is a trishul there, there is a bird there. These symbols are talking about a mental life, which by now in the farmer's life, it becomes a very, very intense life. Intense, so the maximum number of stories and myths and the number of gods and goddesses all develop in this farming land because you are there for years and years, generations in the same place, and you've seen the same kind of things and you have not understood so many things, so you invent the stories with it to explain them. But they are beautiful stories. And all our literature comes from this lore that comes from the farming and urban cultures. So, see, you have the skill of making your own fireplace. Slightly more skill you develop and you can do sculpture, and the same person. Few in the community will develop that skill more than others, and it will become an art. So the art forms start developing. When the agriculture is organized through greater coordination of water and land, then you start getting urban civilizations. Egypt was like that, Mesopotamia was like that, Harappa was like that perhaps, but here you see the South Indian Chola area, between Tanjore and Trichy. This area, for 1,000 years, they have had an irrigation system based on the Kaveri. So they knew every slope of land. And they have the canals which take the water. And then, in every village, there is a stone inscription which says, what is the rota in which the families will take care of the water system. So the family line comes down unbroken. 50 families were given that land, and their progeny keep on carrying that name. And the name will, this year it is Arthur's group which will take care of this, and then it is Madhvi, and then it's somebody else and somebody else. So the whole system is organized as a community system, but presided over by the king. And it's the negotiations between the villages. What happens if you have an irrigation system, and if the village on the upper part uses up more water, the areas below will not get any water. And so they have to have continuous negotiations between villages as to who is getting how much water this time. There has been less rain. How will you control? And so on. And that creates a larger structure than the nomadic, than the hunter-gatherer. The farming cultures create networks of association. And they build their settlements also with a degree of forethought. If you looked at the nomadic houses, they were spread onto the landscape. But these are now, there is a kind of somebody who thinks it out and somebody who lays it out, and meanings are given. For example, in this village, at one end there is a Vishnu temple, at the other end there is a Shiva temple, and these two are the polarities within which that village has been built, which goes on into making the large temple cities. So the farming cultures produce a lot of surplus, and that surplus, where is it to be used? It will be used for making life better for some people. It will be used for building symbols of cohesion. Symbols which say, we are all together in this. It is necessary. There were no communication devices. Phones were not there, radio was not there, television was not there. So buildings had to be things which said, we are all here in this Chola land. And in Chola land we believe in so and so. And so the city was really a way of inscribing a set of values onto the land. Surplus was used for other things also. The irrigation system had to be built, an education system was built, and various other forms. In the worst cases, however, it was used for war. And with the rise of farming cultures comes the idea of real war. Till then, the nomads and the hunters, maybe they shot a few arrows at each other and then went for a drink. But with the farming cultures, you have to create territory. You have to defend territory. You build walls. With walls, you build gates, and then you have defend the walls. And this becomes a big thing. A lot of resource. Now, they had some very interesting things. In South India, for example, some studies show that the king was not allowed to borrow money. The temples, first of all, were the banks. You went and gave donation, and the temple would give loans for your business, for anything that you wanted to. You could go to the temple and ask for a loan, and then pay back with interest, and it will become temple's money increased. This was the system. But the king was not allowed to take a loan from his own temple. King of Kumbakonam would have to take a loan from Tirupati, say. King in Andhra Pradesh would have to take a loan from Tamil Nadu. And so, if you wanted to go to war, and you have to pay for the soldiers, and you have to buy arms and all that. And I told the man in Tirupati, I want to attack you, and please give me a loan. It would be very difficult. And so the warfare, in this part of India at least, was kept at a very low, simmering level, where there would be sort of, though the Tamil movies show otherwise, but there would be a kind of a show of warring, and not real war, I think. So that's the kind of thing that happened in some parts of agricultural civilizations. Others were worse. Then come with agriculture, start the first cities. As I showed you now in cities, things really start happening. So you use up a lot of raw material. To make your houses, to make your clothes, to make your food, for everything. The city dweller keeps on absorbing raw materials from the countryside, from other countries, from everywhere. You know, the Romans, for example, imported peacocks from India because they like to see peacocks in their gardens. And the Indians got wine from Rome in return because they like to drink wine. So, I mean, the cities started creating this kind of movement of raw material. Sustenance is always the same. I mean, there's only one body to take care of, so you can't put in much more there. But knowledge and material practices, cities gave a huge churning, and thousands of different forms of knowledge, languages, literature, stories, forms of dance, forms of music, forms of science, all of that happened from the cities was an explosion of knowledge. But at the same time, the city also was a very greedy thing. It wanted to store, not for, the ambition is not enough to last me a lifetime. The ambition is enough to last me 5 generations, maybe 20 generations. Enough. And that enough is never enough. And so the storage becomes more. And the waste also increases. With the city, everything blows out of proportion. But still, it's a very, very interesting development in human history, because a whole lot of things, for example, this meeting that we are having is a form of knowledge and material products which we are enjoying. So one should not mind it fully, but we should be critical. So the house becomes a well-structured house which is built with permanent materials, which has enough storage of food. So you have the last room in the Ahmedabad house, the Ordo, which has these huge containers and the water is stored underneath. And then you store your grandparents and great-grandparents also, because that is the life. You store the gods, you store gold, you store everything that is valuable. And when the woman is expecting and is about to give birth, she goes into that room, because that's the kind of womb of the house which carries everything. It's the genetic code of the house. And that house then, so in cities, you think not in terms of 5, no, I mean, the nomad used to think in terms of 1 year, this season, next season. Farmer would think in terms of maybe 3-4 years. The city dweller starts thinking in terms of 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, 500 years, and that ambition keeps on growing. So the city dweller's life and the resources that you use in building cities You get stone from Rajasthan, you make brick from southern part of Ahmedabad, you get wood from South Gujarat and Kerala and so on and so Barmatic, and you do all that and you get metal work done. Iron comes from Bihar. The city keeps on absorbing and exchanging materials. But it also evolves all kinds of techniques of making life little easier. And it becomes interested also in showing, because the part of this, the wealth goes into the next phase, which is prestige. And wealth by itself, you can't eat gold, but you can show that you have power through that kind of money. So the house becomes far more elaborate. And the goods that you keep on buying increase, and all the things from all over the world, far and wide, are brought for your. But the poor people also in the city need to find their own equipment and their own materials. And for that also something starts developing. So the city at some point in time is a place where both the poor and the rich are trying to establish and create a long-term future for their lives. And then the city becomes a symbol. The city of God is Jerusalem and Benares and Oxford, the city of knowledge, and Udaipur, the city of art perhaps, or warfare, I don't know which one we should say. But each of these develops a distinctive stamp which has its own cultural acuteness. So the next form of city comes with the 19th century Industrial Revolution, and which Lewis Mumford, great urban historian, has called the Paleotechnic city. And it's a city based on technology. This was the 19th century city, and not too far back, up to 1980, was also Ahmedabad. The city which was, and of course now our smoke is not visible, but we are producing even worse pollutants. Because now, in order to produce, you have to use materials in a most, with the rise of chemical knowledge, with all these things, you are doing more and more complex things. And you are putting human beings, thousands, millions, into a small place. So you have the typical factory crowd there, the housing like in Charles here. This is London in the 19th century. This also is London, is engraving. Chemical factories even today everywhere. And here is Charlie Chaplin showing you what has happened to human beings. So it gave us a great deal of material provision. We have, for example, clothes, more than we could ever have had. My parents had, I think, 4 pairs each. My grandparents probably had 2 pairs each. And more than that was so difficult to get. Every time you got the tailor into the house, and there was great anxiety that there is this much cloth and how he should not make any mistake, because otherwise it's gone. And you could only afford that much. And today we buy a t-shirt and throw in another one. And so but that was made possible by industrialization. So industrialization gave us, for example, we don't know where our water comes from, but we know that there's water. Just buy a bottle of Bisleri and throw the bottle. So all these things, everything one by one will become industrial. And that's the mark of Paleotechnic culture, that it eats up. It swallows whole of culture. And this is something which we haven't really realized. Only Charlie Chaplin realized what could happen if one allowed it to go far enough. I hope you have seen his film Modern Times. It's worth seeing. This is a map of the world showing the trade in the 19th century. Where is everything going? The 19th, late 19th, early 20th century. Everything is moving. The whole geography of the world becomes fodder, becomes raw material for this machine of industrialization. Guha and Gadgil have shown, for example, that the greatest amount of Himalayan forest was cut for building railways all over the world, for railway sleepers. We think that we cut the forests, but the forests were cut, and that wood was exported to South America. The South Chilean of the whole railway all along Chile was built out of wood that went from the Himalayas. And so every piece of forest, every piece of land became resource for this huge machine which had to move coal, which had to move things. And we start getting a movement of this kind in the Paleotechnic culture. And the world, which was a distributed kind of economy, now becomes an economy of concentration. Oh, sorry, I went backwards. I've invented a word following Mumford, and I think we should call it the infotechnic city. There is a new form of city coming into existence, in which material has no significance. Only information has significance. Mostly information about money, banking information, but other information also. So it's a new kind of city, and the promise of that city is that we can become nomads again. We don't have to carry anything. That's the promise. The danger of that city is that we are going to lose our bodies. So let's see what happens. With every promise there is a danger. So here's the information city coming into existence. Singapore, this is the center of financial movements across the world, and could have been some part of London, but unfortunately London still has brick and things like that. So the photographs are not that impressive. With this part of Singapore, it's absolutely clear that. But with it comes another reality, and that is, in this global sucking are left out millions of people. I'm putting the argument a little harshly, only so that it makes some kind of a dent. And the flows now. These are the flows of money and resources. They are all going where? See that blue blob in the center? Now it will, China, the green one is increasing now. So it will move this side maybe. Maybe India will increase a bit. But overall, what is happening is that the rest of the world is paying for the luxuries of the small arts, which have captured the information economy. Now it is no longer possible to talk about cities as territories, like you could talk about Mumbai, you could talk about Ahmedabad, you could talk about Anand, Nadia. In the next few years, you will have to talk about a global network. And Nadia will probably, I don't know what will happen to Nadia. And the Gota of Anand, whether it will still be available or it will be branded and it will become a what do you call it, GI label Ananda Gota, and it becomes a global phenomenon that you can buy Ananda Gota anywhere. You don't have to go to Anand at all. And maybe ultimately they'll just be able to, you switch it on and you can get the taste and feel of Ananda Gota just in your mouth without any Gota at all. This is the ultimate goal of the information city. The ultimate goal of the information city is to make everything into information, because then it moves very fast. And the faster it moves, the more the profit. See the kind of human beings it produces. They can't even eat in peace. And please, some of you might be working in such environments. Don't mind this, but it really makes me feel very funny when I see this kind of thing. So you now have the global nomad. Global nomad, there are two types, the rich nomad and the poor nomad. I showed you both at the beginning. So the rich nomad uses huge amount of resources like never before. For example, how will we build chips at all, say 30 years from now, is unknown, because there are certain metals which are fast getting depleted. And then we won't be able to make computers. And then what will happen to us? Major problem. So we are using up resources, huge amounts. We are creating waste like never before. Plastic islands floating in the Pacific. And this plastic is going to be, in the next 20 years, it's going to be the biggest problem mankind will have encountered ever. Storage, we don't need any storage. It's all stored in information and communication. So digitized, it's digitized economy. And with digitized, you don't know what's happening to the world. I can spend, I can do this, I can move that, I can send it from here to there. What happens to the world I can never see. And it's all in the virtual reality. Therefore, I never even feel unhappy at what I'm doing. And this is the rich person's virtual, and that's the kind of society. And you can see all the forms. And the poor. They have the tiniest of resources. Not even what the nomad had. Tiniest resource, just subsistence, a little bit of labor and knowledge produced, some waste, hardly anything to carry tomorrow. And this is the majority of the world right now. This is the majority of the world, not the minority. So civilization, human civilization, which started with that mother taking care of her child and wanting to settle down, now has gone through the idea of war and through the idea of profit without measure. And it's the poor live in conditions like that. And see the migration routes. It's very interesting. In India, many of the routes are coming towards Gujarat. Migrant labor from everywhere. Gujarat, Maharashtra, Delhi. Talks about Tamil Nadu, not more than that. But so we as a locality are absorbing this global poor into making our economies sound. So now let's do a quick sort of summarization. In the older system, when the farmer, the city dweller, the nomad, the hunter-gatherer, they were all part of one system. Somebody's waste became somebody else's resource. So the cow's droppings that the nomads had became a resource for the farmer. Farmers, something became a resource for the city, and like that, the whole thing was a sort of symbiotic diagram, which has all this kind of messy, it's very messy. It was not an organized thing, not like these computerized figures of the share market that you see today. Resources were moving and things were being exchanged, but there was order. It only looked messy. I was very surprised, for example, I had gone to Kolhapur. And Kolhapur, they told me, this jaggery, it's a big product of Kolhapur. I said, yes. So, very rich people. I said, yeah, reasonably rich, but do you know where the price of jaggery is decided? I said, no. They said, it's in Unja. That the trader in Unja is trading in, and this is for 100 years this has been happening. So what looked like a mess was really acutely organized exchanges in a symbiotic pattern. But now, the exchange is like this. The global poor's labor becomes a raw material for the global rich. And this is happening right now. That civilization has become an exploitative process rather than a regenerative process. If you took, for example, a city, we now call cities as something where, municipal boundary. But it used to be a set of villages along with a town and formed a cluster. So there was a mutuality, there was a responsibility both ways. And then together many such areas also made a sort of higher level of mutuality. But today there is no such thing as geographical space. There are only points in space, and these points in space can be connected at will in different ways through electronic communication. And so all ties, all degrees of cultural formativeness is reduced. So you get a cloud. This is a map of internet. It's a map of internet networks. And it shows it's a kind of cloud, and you can go anywhere in it. And you can spread a rumor in it, you can spread news in it, and you can create riots, you can create all kinds of things simply by nudging this cloud a little. And the more you know how to nudge this cloud, the more power you will have. So then finally the question, which kind of utopia? City was built for an utopia, a better life. God's city, the city of justice, the city of joy. These are the kind of words that people used. So they were utopias. So you can have one kind of nomad. These are both nomads. They have no home. They are carrying minimum. They don't store anything. Everything is happening here in them, and here perhaps a little bit. But one becomes vulnerable, opens himself to the world, and the other becomes completely sealed in his own world. This is the choice. Do we want to open ourselves, or do we want to close ourselves as civilizations? On left hand side is the Kutchi nomad and her tent up there. On the right hand side is Rainer Benham, architectural historian who wrote about cities, and he went around on a bicycle and he had this utopian diagram that said, in future I won't need clothes, I won't need anything. All I need is a sort of pneumatic structure in which by filling up air it becomes a kind of tent, And here he is sitting without any clothes. There are 4 of him, real, 5. And then he has got a sort of machine in which all the communications are coming. TV, phone, this, that, everything. And air conditioning, cleaning the air, everything is happening with that. And with that becomes the new nomad. Question is, which nomad do we want to become? No, it's good to become nomads, I think, because you carry less and you don't get weighed down and you don't get tied down. And for young people, not getting tied down is so important. At some point, maybe getting tied down also is becoming important. Maybe you want to get tied down to one person. You don't want to get tied down to an entire family. Huh? So the dystopias. This is from an old movie, 1930s movie called The Metropolis, which said the city of the future will be like this. It's a frightening city. This is a more recent movie, where the only thing you can see is the whizzing of things, things are whizzing past. No human being is to be seen. There's only movement without end. And here's another city. This is the city of consumption. So you have the big advertisements, you have the McDonald's in the corner, and it's supposed to be a sort of heaven where you can go and see any movie, enjoy any food, do all that, but it's made into that dark and problematic utopia. And those are the utopias which will come to us if we don't remain fully awake. Here's another film which shows an urban dystopia. So many people and so much anger and so much fighting, they had to be caged. This film is very, very sad film. It's happening right now. All over India it's happening. So which is the utopia that we want? Which is the dystopia that we want? And that is what I will leave with you for discussion. That we are talking about civilization. Civilization means better humans, better life, better ways of being together, better ways of constructing a society which allows all of us different ways of existence, better ways of using only what we need, wasting the least, better ways of keeping our relations happy. And versus that is the whole paraphernalia of a civilization bent upon, not civilization, a machine bent upon creating a warlike, insane, uncivilized existence. Thank you.